Hi, everyone. Welcome into the latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie, your front row seat to cannabis policy and the shifting power dynamics. I'm your host, Shad Dales, and today we've got a story that is a bold one. How has President Donald Trump, in just the past 60 days or so, essentially put drug cartels on notice via military strikes, policy shifts, designations, and escalations? We'll walk through what's happened since August of 2025 to now, October of 2025, every major move, every message sent. Then I'll show you why this is relevant to cannabis and how it strengthens the regulated cannabis narrative. So let's get into it in our latest TDR Cannabis in 5. But now a quick word for Morgan & Morgan. Hey everyone, there's a reason smart investors celebrate when their portfolio jumps 40% in a year, just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Think about it. When you're investing, you want the right team in your corner. The same is true if you're injured in dealing with an insurance company. And that is where Morgan & Morgan comes into the equation. Why? Well, they've got more than 1,000 attorneys and over 100 offices nationwide, and they've been fighting for people for over 35 years. And their track record is hard to ignore. Let me explain a little bit further. Case in point, in Florida, a client was offered $350,000, but walked away with $12 million. In Pennsylvania, another client, they turned $650,000 offer into $26 million. That's a 40x return. So in total, Morgan & Morgan, they've recovered more than $25 billion for over 500,000 clients. So really, when you hire him, it's like bringing in a legal army that has your back. Because if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And let's be honest, not all law firms are created equal. But with Morgan & Morgan, their fee is free unless they win. You can start your claim right now by clicking the link in the description below or by scanning this QR code on your screen with your phone. At the end of the day, if you want what you deserve, make sure you go in with the right team by contacting Morgan & Morgan today. Now, let's get back to the rest of our video. All right, with that now out of the way, let's get into how Trump is escalating the war on cartels, because he's put them very much on notice, especially over these past 60 days. All right, let's begin with one of the biggest and boldest moves. Earlier this month, in October of 2025, the Trump administration formally declared that the U.S. is in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels. So in that memo to Congress, Trump's team argues that drug trafficking and cartel violence are not just crime, but acts of war against the U.S., and thus American military force is legally justified. So that shift from law enforcement to armed conflict paradigm, it sets the tone for everything that now follows. So let's move to what that declaration has translated into on the water. When we look back on September 2nd, 2025, the U.S. Navy launched a strike on a vessel in the Southern Caribbean, asserting it to what was tied to Venezuela's Tren de Aragua cartel. The strike killed 11 people on board. Then on September 15th, another boat was struck, and Trump claimed 3 men were killed. On October 3rd, a third strike was announced, 4 killed on a boat heading towards U.S. waters. And most recently, earlier this week on October 14th, Trump announced a 5th strike, 6 killed, alleged narcotics traffickers in international waters near Venezuela. So these strikes have been framed not as simple interdictions, but as military operations against narcoterrorists, is what they call them. So the administration claims it has targeted 4+ boats so far, with at least 21 fatalities. So to support these actions, the Pentagon announced the creation of a counter-narcotics joint task force to coordinate operations in Latin America. Additionally, new naval deployments have indeed occurred. The U.S. sent 10 F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico to bolster operations in the Southern Caribbean. And then throughout that, Trump's language, it has been very, very tough. He said, quote, "We blew it up and it'll happen again," end quote. So he's not playing around here. But Trump's message isn't only in missiles and warships, he's also attacking the cartels on legal, diplomatic, and financial fronts. Earlier this year, Trump's administration designated key Latin American cartels, including Tren de Aragua, Cartel de los Soles, and others, as foreign terrorist organizations. Sanctions have been imposed on Mexican cartel-linked networks, including the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, targeting both trafficking and fuel theft operations. More than 50 Mexican politicians' visas were revoked in mid-October as part of a push to crack down on cartel influence and networks. So a lot of law and order going on here. These moves, they send a clear signal as well. Cartels are not untouchable. So whether through economic isolation or diplomatic pressure, the administration is indeed escalating. So really at this point, the question is why? Why go so hard and why go so fast? Well, here's what's going on. Number one, you have demonstration of deterrence. The message is loud. Smuggling into U.S. waters, especially through known routes, will be met with force. Two, you have cutting funding. Many cartels depend on revenue by narcotics. By disrupting shipments, you threaten their business. Three, you have political signaling. It's a visible, bold stance, helpful for domestic messaging on law, order, security, and border control. One that this administration is not shying away from whatsoever. Then number four, you have shifting narrative. By classifying cartels as combatants, the administration reframes them as enemies of the state, not mere criminals. And then finally, number five, supporting allied states. It's in an effort to pressure regimes like Venezuela's Maduro by making cartel operations riskier domestically and internationally. So all this combines to create the impression the cartels are no longer operating in the shadows. The U.S. is hunting them down. So that truly is a notice, especially with what's happened over these past 60 days. They aren't screwing around. And to be honest with you, it's about time. So now, why does this matter when we talk about all this for the cannabis industry? How can those in the regulated cannabis space benefit from this shift in tone? Well, the first thing that comes up is better legitimacy. When the U.S. government draws a sharp line between illicit drug traffickers and legal consumers, it bolsters the argument that regulation works and that not all drug-related activities should be grouped together. You also have differentiation. The cartels are painted as violent, transnational, terror-like actors. By contrast, cannabis businesses in regulated markets can emphasize safety, compliance, transparency, and separation from criminal activities. Then you have investor confidence, policy stability, and the sense that the government is serious about cracking down on the black market supply can really reassure investors that regulated players have protective walls here. You've also got policy leverage. Proponents of cannabis reform or expansion can point to this war on cartels as evidence that legalization, regulation is indeed part of the solution here. By shrinking the black market, enforcement resources can be better allocated. And then also we have public narrative. The public conversation is shifting. Drug policy is not simply a moral panic, it's a security discussion. So the framing can soften resistance to regulation. So essentially, Trump's heavy posture against cartels helps disentangle drug enforcement from cannabis regulation, positioning legal cannabis as a more stable, legitimate alternative. And this is a point that should not get blurred. But of course, the strategy, it does come with risks and open questions. You have legal justification. Many critics question whether the strikes on vessels in international waters satisfies the law of war, especially given requirements for proportionality warning and capture first protocols. You also have congressional oversight. Earlier this month, Senate Republicans rejected a war powers resolution that would limit Trump's unilateral authority over cartel strikes. You also have collateral damage and regional reactions. Let's face it, Latin American countries have expressed concern over condemnation, and some view U.S. actions as an overreach. You also have to look at the effectiveness in all this. Cartels, they are indeed adaptive. Disrupting routes may push them to shift routes, innovate, or rely more on land and air trafficking. And then you have the blurring lines. Over-aggressive enforcement could risk targeting non-violent or minor offenders, raising civil liberty concerns, which could push back on cannabis rights if not managed carefully here. So let's be careful here. So while the posture is indeed strong, it must be executed very carefully. So let's look at timeline here now, and where do we go from here? First up, expect more military strikes on vessels, especially as the Caribbean route remains vital to cartel logistics. Also, the Counter-Narcotics Task Force will coordinate future operations, more intelligence sharing, more aerial, maritime, and possibly drone efforts. There's also further designations and sanctions. They are indeed likely, expanding the list of cartel groups designated as terrorist or sanctioned actors. And then domestically, we might see more aggressive cooperation with Mexico, Colombia, and Caribbean states. For cannabis regulatory advocates, this is a moment indeed to lean in. Publish op-eds, policy papers, and messaging that link cartel combat with legal market growth. That is important. So really, that's how over the past 60 days, President Trump has very clear put drug cartels on notice. From declaring declaring a new kind of war, to sinking vessels in the Caribbean, to sanctioning networks and revoking visas, the messaging is unmistakable. Traffickers are no longer untouchable, and then some. And as I've shown, this isn't just about enforcement. There's real upside for regulated cannabis markets here. Because really, when the government draws a sharp line between criminal networks and legal consumers, it reshapes public perception, supports legitimacy, and gives regulated cannabis a stronger footing here. So now you know. All right, this has been our latest TDR Cannabis in 5 presented by Dutchie. Let us know what your feedback is on this video. We'd love to get your comments as usual. Give this video a like, smash on that bell for all notifications, and subscribe to us and stay connected here at the TDR Cannabis in 5 podcast. That's it for now. We'll see you in the next video. I'm your host, Shad Dales, and thanks again for watching.